Hi, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
All right. Okay. I don't know who else is going to show up, but welcome to the meeting for today. Today we're going to have Yash and Devansh present on, I think, deep learning architectures. So they're going to tell us what they've found in their, in researching this presentation. So I don't know who else is going to show up, but they can come in as they come in. And so, is there any news from anyone over the last week? Anything they want to bring up? Issues, deadlines, other things?
I'm done with the GCI membership for 2019. It got concluded in this month. So that's one update from my side.
Okay. Yeah. You tell us a little bit about it, or?
Yeah. So, like I told before, it's like GSOC, but it's for high school students, like from ages from 13 to 18. So, I did it for the principal organization, and we had like we like created some issues like tasks for them to solve, and each task can be claimed by many people. Like we decided how many instances can a task have. Let us say I created a task like create a GitHub account and I put 50 instances. Then 50 people can claim the task and then they can chat with us for if they had any issues or such. Like that, these tasks range from very simple to like very complex. But I was surprised to see that people like those students even solve those very complex ones that even maybe a person with one or two years experience might take some time. So yeah, that's really good. I was really shocked to see that.
Yeah, it's always a good experience to, always interesting what you'll see when you do something like that. So that's good. You enjoyed it?
Yes, of course. It was my first time officially mentoring. Previously, it was only my juniors in college, and now I got to meet a lot of people. Even I learned from them as well, not just the other way. So that's a nice experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Congratulations. Yeah. So, anything else before we turn to the talk? Dick, did you have anything you wanted to bring up?
No.
Okay. All right. So yeah, don't forget we have. Well, next week I don't know what we have on the schedule, but we might have something from. Ujjwal. There we go. There he is. We might have something from Jesse, and I might present something next week. I can't remember exactly who's on the schedule. I think it might be Ujjwal, actually, who's on the schedule. So I think he said he wanted to do a talk on something, I think biologically related. I don't know if he's still on for that. Anyways, we'll arrange that over the So, Ujwal, are you still on for your talk next week? Do you know? Is it still the same topic? Okay, he's going to present on DNA fingerprinting. And so we'll get to see a little bit about that. I mean, it's up to the presenter to make it, interesting, and Ujwal's presented before, so he kind of knows how to some of the tips I've given him before on presenting things. So, well, that's okay. That's fine. You can't talk today. That's okay. So we're looking forward to that next week. But now we're going to turn to Devansh, Batra, and Yash, and they're going to talk about deep learning architectures.
Hello everyone, I'm Yash here. I will be speaking with Devansh. So, let me present the screen. I'm with Devansh right now.
Yeah, you're on the same account.
Yes.
Okay.
So, spatial temporal features broadly means features having both spatial and temporal qualities. So, in tasks like semi-supervised video object detection, where you have object segmented in the initial frame of a video, and you want to segment it in all the other frames of the video. So, here using spatial features and temporal features alongside can lead to both better and faster results. And so you don't need to segment here the individual frames separately. What you can do is that you can use the motion information and build upon the results of the previous frames and go on segmenting the video. So there are other tasks like video question answering, action recognition and localization in the videos or video description, and if you want to study the brain activity from functional MRI data, so here learning the spatial and temporal features simultaneously lead to better results. So this graph here shows the number of papers related to spatial temporal feature mining and their usage. We can see that this has been increasing year by year, and this data is up to June 2019. So this is gaining a lot of attention now these days. So first of all, I would like to talk about a variant of 2D convolution neural networks that we normally use. So the difference, this is 3D convolution neural networks. So the difference between them is that in 2D CNNs, the kernel has a depth equal to the input depth and strides in two directions only. Whereas in 3D CNN, you can see that the kernel depth is less than the depth of the input, and it strides in the horizontal and vertical direction along with the depth. So first it will cover the first plane, then it will stride in the depth direction, and then it will cover the second plane, and so on. So 3D CNNs are well suited for spatiotemporal features. Compared to 2D CNN, they can model temporal information better because they are having depth strides also, and they can learn temporal features. Consider if the images are stacked on top of each other, and if you apply them through a 3D CNN, they can model temporal qualities also. So even if you take stacks of images and pass them to 2D
CNN, they will produce a single image as an output. So 2D CNN completely loses temporal information, whereas in 3D CNN, you can use this output volume and compute some more complex 3D features. So there's a paper. In this paper, they have used 3D CNN architectures for video action recognition, and they have shown that it outperformed all the baseline 2D CNN models. And here they used divided the video in 16 frame segments. So each segment had 16 frames in them, and they were 8 frames split. So two consecutive frame segments had 8 frames in common. So for each segment, they passed it through the 3D convolution. It learned the temporal features there also, so and it predicted whether there is an action, human action occurring in these 16 frames, and outputted which action it is. So it can be skating, skiing, and etc. and etc. So the idea is that you can divide the video into segments, or for each segment you can take some frames that are in the past, previous frames, or next frames in the future, and use these frames to predict for each frame the corresponding required task. But DDCNN 7 drawback that you can only take a fixed number of frames as an input. So the number will be fixed like 16 or 32, and you can't vary that number, which makes them unsuitable for capturing temporally varying actions. And also 3D CNNs require large data sets to produce good results. So this is a limitation of them. And now these are optical flows. So optical flows or optical flow or optic flow is the motion of objects between consecutive frames in a video sequence caused by the relative movement of objects and cameras. So for example, this bus is moving. These optic flow vectors show the pixel level movement of this bus. So the purpose of this is that at pixel level we want to know how things are moving across the image and how motion is happening, and for each pixel we want to know how it will move in the image and what will be its position in the next frame. So this is not about tracking sort of individual objects and marking them. This is pixel level, and we want to model the global motion of the scene. And in this example, you can see there are vectors showing these are interpolated on the current frame, but these vectors are calculated using the present frame and the next frame. For example, the pixel is here, and this is here in the next frame. So there is a vector corresponding to them. For each vector, there is a direction, there is a magnitude. So they provide a concise description of both the regions of the image undergoing motion and the velocity of the motion. And one observation can be drawn from this is that you can see the objects closer to the camera have larger optical flows, while the objects away from the camera have smaller optical flows. So there are algorithms that capture depth information from these flow vectors also. And color representation of optical flows is quite popular. So we can represent the angle. For example, this image has been shown using the HSV color model, where hue denotes the angle of the optical flow, in which angle it is going. For example, this red falls in 0 to 60 degrees, so it is, you can see that it has been shown red, while blue and purplish colors are shown near 300 to 240 to 300 degrees, and the value of the color intensity shows the magnitude normalized between 0 to 255. So you have the magnitude, you normalize it in a color range, and you give it the corresponding intensity. So And there is another thing like sparse and dense optical flow. In sparse optical flow, you have you take some important points in the image. For example, you find some points that are important like the corners and edges of the objects, and you calculate optical flow for them only. So you don't need to calculate for every pixel. Whereas in dense, we get optical flows for every pixel. So dense optical flows are obviously higher, more accurate than sparse optical flows, but they are computationally more expensive and slow. And there are many algorithms for calculating optical flows. So, for example, there are mathematical algorithms which calculate exact optical flows, and like there is a Lucas-Canada algorithm and Farnham algorithm. There are basic assumptions in them is that first of all there is a brightness constancy, which means the pixels should move in such a way that their brightness is constant, the intensity of their light is constant. So and spatial coherence means that the nearby points belong to the same surface. For example, there is a patch of 9 points in a 3x3 square, so they belong to the same surface, they exhibit same kind of motion in all directions. And small motions means that the pixel should move slowly and not change suddenly. For example, in a video there is a complete scene change, and this will so optical flow will break there. So there are apart these mathematical algorithms, you could also use neural networks to calculate optical flows. For example, in this paper, they have presented a they have presented a model to estimate optical flows using 2 consecutive frames of a video, and there is a present frame, this is the next frame. So they pass both of them in the convolution neural network, and so they use 2 variants in this paper. First of all, in the first variant they passed both the frames concatenated together, while in the other they processed each frame separately and combined the information using a correlation layer that performs multiplicative patch. So what happens that they pass the frame separately but combine the information using a correlation layer. So in the correlation layer, they compared each patch of the first frame with each patch of the second frame, and then pass this information for further refinement and produces a segmented mask. So you can consider this just as a segmentation task, but here instead of using the color and texture to segment the pixels, we are using the motion cues and how the pixels are changing with motion. So this is the color coded optical flows, and in further 2 years later they improved the model quite better. This became quite better than the mathematical algorithms. This became comparable to the mathematical algorithms, and so what they did, they stacked 3 flow nets in a stacked architecture. They used 3 flow nets, so in a stacked architecture. So what happened, they were also looking for intermediate optical flows. So they were not generating the optical flow in one stage, they were generating it in intermediate manner, and they also elaborated on small displacements by introducing a subnetwork specializing on small motions. So they took care of small motions where you seem that there is no motion, but the objects are moving quite slowly. So they were not captured earlier in the original flownet. So they introduced a spatial subnet architecture which captured that also. So the use of optical flows in deep learning has become quite popular. So this was a paper in 2014. Here they used optical flow to calculate, to estimate the action in the given video. So they did one thing, they used two branches. One is a spatial branch, which calculate the spatial qualities, and one use the optical flows to calculate the temporal features. So here they use a different representation of optical flows. They use two frames instead of one. This frame showed the magnitude of the optical flow in x direction, while this showed in the right direction. So the to model the direction in the x and y axis, they used different intensities. For example, they took a threshold. Above that threshold, all the intensities above all that threshold will model positive axis, and below that threshold will denote negative axis. So, and other than that, they used a bidirectional optical flow, not just looking at the future. They also looked how the object has gone to the come from the past and how it will go in the future. So they use some sort of bidirectional optical flows to label the video segments. So, and building on this, there has been a lot of work using two streams CNNs, one with one specializing on a spatial feature and other on the optical flows. For example, there is a vehicle tracking and speed estimation. This used optical flows just like in spatial and temporal speed. However, there are some issues about it. So it has optical flows that have modeling issues around the motion, around the edges of an object. For example, there is a sudden change in the surfaces and there is a sharp object. Optical flows find it difficult to model them. Also, you may find here that there are a lot of wrong vectors. For example, this vector is quite large and out of the motion. And consider also there are other problems like when a ball is shiny ball is spinning fastly, so you can't model the revolving motion in using optical flows. Also, these are computationally very expensive, as you have to label every pixel and before using them in the neural networks. So one solution can be that you model every pixel but use only 50% of the pixels uniformly distributed in the image. So, or you can use sparse optical flows where you first find out that which points are important to you, like edges and corners of the objects, and then calculate optical flows for them and then use them in the subsequent modeling. So this is all from my side, and now Devansh will speak up.
Hi, so I'll continue with where Yash left off. As he mentioned, optical flows are very expensive to calculate, and there are multiple different algorithms which can be used to calculate these optical flows. So the NIPS 2014 paper has been very popular in video segmentation. So as in 2019, a CVBR paper built upon this network. As you can see, it is like very similar to the previous network which Yash had explained over here. There is a spatial branch, there is a temporal branch. But the thing is, they completely get rid of optical flows. Yash explained some of the ways we could somehow prevent the huge computation required for calculating optical flows by the two processes of either using half the pixels for flow estimation or either using sparse optical flows. But in any case, these optical flows do not fit well within the neural network which is being trained. They need to be calculated either separately or using a different network. So the main objective of this paper was to bring about a end-to-end
trainable network, which could be used for video segmentation, which did not rely on optical flow, yet it had a similar performance. The performance in video object segmentation for with optical flows has been very good. Now this is how it works. The model in the the architecture in the previous paper I have explained it over here. There is a temporal coherence branch and there is a spatial segmentation branch. I feel most of us would be familiar with spatial segmentation or image segmentation from the previous work which had been done in the last year's Google Summer of Code. So the spatial segmentation branch tries to segment an object within a single image, while the temporal coherence branch is the main task of this is to maintain a coherence between the previous few frames and the current frame being predicted. The way they do is using an adversarial training method. I feel most this should be similar to anyone who has studied GANs before. So they try to feed a somewhat fake predicted image to the network, and they find an adversarial loss. How this is done is by taking the past few images. In the paper, they have taken delta images, which is a parameter which can be optimized to whatever use case we are trying to develop for. So we take delta number of images if from the past. So t minus 1, t minus 2, t minus 3, t minus 4 until t minus delta are the frame numbers for for when we are trying to predict segmentation for video frame t. These are passed through ResNet layers. ResNet 1, ResNet 2, ResNet 3, ResNet 4, ResNet 5. ResNet CNN has been used widely for feature estimation from images. So it should be familiar. And then they try to reform this image using this feature vector that has been formed. They try to reform the image at time t using the feature vectors learned from these delta images from the previous times. Now there might be some information loss when you are trying to convert something from a less number of let's say less number of parameters to a high number of pixel values. So as you can see, the initial layers are quite big, and as they keep advancing, the number of pixels gets reduced, as also the number of channels is reduced to one. It becomes a single vector. So now from a single vector, which is essentially a feature vector for this delta number of images, I need to form a new image, which is a three-dimensional vector. It has RG and B frames within it. So during this time, there is going to be a loss. So for this purpose, what is fed is there are skip connections within these layers. These are basically a copy of features learned before in a previous convolution. So this helps to avoid information loss, and the images formed are more accurate. And then they use a discriminator to find the adversarial loss, which tells how well our temporal coherence model is performing. Then there is a spatial segmentation branch, which of course works in a very similar way. There are 5 ResNet layers, which with the ResNet 4 and ResNet 5 have been slightly modified in this paper. As you can see, this is the original ResNet 4 and ResNet 5 layers. But for the spatial segmentation branch, they have optimized it by making a few changes in these last 2 layers. Again, there are a few skip connections, and the main task of it is to get a mask which is a 1 0
oh, encoded image of which tells what segments are present. Now they follow a four-phase training, which I think could be helpful in whatever pre-trained model we try to develop during the summer. So firstly, they train the temporal coherence branch, pre-train the temporal coherence branch actually. Then they pre-train the spatial segmentation branch. Both of these are done using standard datasets. Then they train both temporal coherence branch and spatial segmentation branch on the target dataset. And finally, there is an online training phase. This online training phase is for a particular video itself, for all of those frames. So you can see more about it in the paper I referenced over here. We will share the PPT with you. But this was a very interesting architecture which is less computationally expensive. It is end-to-end neural network and it doesn't use optical flows for accurate prediction of segmentation. Now, I would like to bring this model to your attention, UNet. A UNet is basically what we use over here. A unit was made before this paper came out, so they only updated the temporal coherence branch with a unit. Let us see what a unit actually is. So there is an input image file and there is an output segmentation map. And you can see there are convolution layers. There are actually convolution plus ReLU layers. So the ReLU layers are here to introduce nonlinearity. So the model actually learns nonlinear features and not just linear features. But we can approximate it to just the convolution layers and they decrease the size of it by max pooling. Further, there are skip connections within these layers. So the first layer has skip connection with the last layer. The second layer has skip connection to the second last layer. This way, information loss is prevented because you are already getting some information from the previous layers through skip connections. And finally, it gets converted to a single dimensional vector, which is gradually built into the segmentation map. And so international symposium on biomedical images has several challenges for segmentation. It happens annually, and this model has been performing the best so far. I've included a video. I'm not sure if the audio mic will be. Sorry. Is the audio audible?
Then the data is propagated through the network in the long haul cluster path, and at the end, the right segmentation map comes out. To box corresponds to quality check. Most of the operations are convolutions followed by an only application function. In type, it looks like this. It is a standard frequency convolution followed by an only application function. An important design choice is that we only use the valid part of the convolution, which means that for a frequency convolution, one pixel order is lost. This allows later to process large images in individual times. Operation in the UNet is a max pooling operation. It reduces the XY size of the feature map, so I have illustrated it as downward arrow.
Oh, hello? Hello, Devansh? Yeah.
Yeah, actually the audio is not very much audible. You can share the link of the slides and like we can watch it later. Like it is not audible
Okay,
for me.
okay, I'll do that. So just have a look at some of these visuals at what kind of results are being produced in this ICPA, ISBI challenges.
We have taken the image, rapidly separate evidence as structure narrative and in terms of applications of the SB celebrating challenge 2050 on the data sets.
So in this case, the yellow layer tells what the ground truth is, and it has been segmented manually, and the cyan part of the image tells what the unit model has achieved. So unit itself can be used for segmentation in videos, and as you can see, it has been used very well in this biological domain. I'll share the link of the video and the paper with you later. Sorry for not. Now, there is unit has been used for volumetric segmentation as well. So you can segment the uh, in a 3D space as well, not just in 2D. There are two types of segmentation which can be done in this domain. There is a semi-automated segmentation and a fully automated segmentation. In the semi-automated segmentation, the user must provide some initial slices of each volume to be segmented. So if I am able to provide a few slices of this object, the unit can predict the, a dense segmentation of the entire object in the volumetric space. Then there is also a 3D, it can also work in 3D mode. So this paper explains how this works. What in 3D, it is an end-to-end model and it has been pre-trained before using such features. I also wanted to share about Cone LSTM. Cone LSTM is basically very similar to an LSTM, except the matrix multiplication has been changed to convolutions. So cone LSTM has been used in next frame prediction. There are very few examples of where cone LSTM has been used, but in video it is used to predict the next frame very well. The model or architecture which was used was similar to an encoder decoder architecture in RNN. Also, the original paper focused on nowcasting of rainfall. It predicted what rainfall would be there, and it wasn't even image data. So cone LSTM works well even in multimodal situations where it may not always be text or image. So cone LSTM may be confused with CNN LSTM, but these are completely different. A CNN LSTM are like the simplest kind of models which we can use to model these spatiotemporal features. They are basically a CNN model which tries to get an input, which tries to get a learned feature vector from input data. Further, uh, this is passed to an LSTM model to learn whatever uh, temporal features it wants to. Then there is a dense layer which finally predicts an output. So these were used initially but have since lost. They don't perform that well. There still are a few applications on which these have been tested. Those involve activity recognition, image description, or video description. But almost all of this include getting a textual output. So for these tasks, we may use CNN LSTMs, but these are not very suitable for segmentation purposes. So that's all from our side.
Okay. All right. Well, that's very good. Thank you. Let's take a look at the comments here in the chat. We were talking about the video, so you can share the link with us. So, yeah, I like the presentation. If you could send me a copy of the slides and link to the video, I can make them available to the rest of the group just as a link. So, actually, if we're going to have a chat about some of the slides, could you share your screen again? I just wanted to make sure people had an opportunity to ask questions with the slides sort of on the screen.
Okay, Sashi.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, does anyone have any questions about the talk? Like anything that maybe captured your attention or was something you were confused about?
I'll slowly shuffle the slides so you can remember what you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I have one question actually. So I was thinking about the in the diatom paper that we recently did, and we did deep learning analysis of data. We also did a template version of the analysis of the basilaria. So the cells were segmented and then they were tracked using templates of the cells. What you're suggesting here is we could do something similar to that, but just using a deep learning architecture. So you would have, and you probably don't know this paper, but what we had was we had a colony of a colony of single cells that operate together. It's called it's a diatom. So they're sort of, it's a microorganism, but it's not a unicellular organism. They exist in colonies that are where the cells are these long filaments that are stacked together, and they move in a way that is collective in nature. So the cells move against one another, and they have pretty complicated movement.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So we did this paper on this organism called Basilaria, and it's a diatom, and they're marine microorganisms, but they're multicellular organisms. So my question is from that is that in that analysis that we did of those organisms, we did sort of where we segmented the cells, and then we did use each cell as a template, and then looked at their relative motion. But in this case, you can actually combine that templating method with a deep learning method to identify the cells or identify the features and then identify the motion of the features relative to one another.
Yes, sir, we can do that, definitely. That's why, that's what I thought we would be doing in this ESG. So for the pre-trained models project, that's why we prepared the slides.
Yeah. So, so you could, so you could do that, and it would be maybe more efficient, maybe not. We'd have to find out. But, so you can also, you were talking about pre-trained models a lot, and as opposed to like a conventional training method. So could you elaborate a little bit more on that? What's the is like, how do they envision pre-trained models in this literature? Is it like is this sort of the standard that they do, or is this like something that they compare with like regular training? I was a little confused about the whole training technique that they're using.
Okay, so let us have, so this is probably the paper which I read the most number of times within in these slides. So this might just be open in one of my tabs. No, it's not. So
as you can see, there clearly are ResNet 1, ResNet 2, ResNet 3, ResNet 4, ResNet 5. These are the layers they are using. These are actually from the ResNet model. It is used heavily in computer vision to get, let's say, a vector of outputs from a 3D frames of images, any vector. So ResNet and VGG, ImageNet, such models, such pre-trained models have been used heavily for this purpose. So these have several applications in object recognition, in segmentation, as we have seen. Now, so the architecture can they are using the pre-trained models initial weights. So there is already some learned information from a pre-trained model. So we can do what we can do is probably create a model which can get these spatial features. So this would not be a temporal model in any way. So this would probably just be a clone of ResNet or ImageNet or VGG. So we can train this on a bunch of our images from DevoWorm or some other images or from the data set which were used in the diagram paper you just mentioned. Or we could possibly train it on a bunch of or a collection of these different data sources and what whether we can get a better result in segmentation of, let's say, the basal area diatom when as opposed to using this standard architecture from the STCNN. Or we could like propose a completely a novel pre-trained model which has both this temporal and spatial branch along with some blunt weights of these convolution layers which may or may not be based on ResNet. So that can be used throughout for so as I mentioned, there were four phases of training within this. Four phases of training this. The fourth frame, the third and fourth actually work on the target data set. The first two training phases, which are done differently for temporal coherence branch and spatial coherence branch, actually uh, use preset data set which are used for segmentation. Let me open up this paper and show you what exactly I'm saying. Okay, so these are the four phases of training which have been used in this paper. Pre-training temporal coherence branch. It is done over this data set. This is a standard data set. We could replace it with one of the biological data sets which should intuitively increase our performance. And again, there is partial segmentation branch. This also uses standard data set, the MSRA 10K. We could again change it to something which better suits the biological domain. And then I guess this model could be used for segmentation throughout biological domain by simply changing the target data set in online training. So we pre-train like the first three phases of training this model. That then the person can use our pre-trained model to to set it on their own data set.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that sounds good. And the reason I guess the thing I would point out is that in a lot of data and a lot of biological data, you kind of have a mix of temporal and spatial features. So, like, let's take something like cell division. If you're observing cell division in a time series, that cell division, you can't necessarily, use like past images to predict the future cleanly. There's going to be some correction you're going to have to make. I mean, I guess you could use it to predict the future, but the image, it differs over time in terms of what's there. You have maybe like fewer cells and more cells over time, but there are these division events that I don't know how the algorithm would handle.
So you are predicting the future exactly. You are only predicting the next frame from the previous few frames. It is a single frame. I think you can easily predict the next frame. It's like 1/24th of a second from given the previous 12 or 13 frames.
I guess it would probably work. I mean, it's going to, Ojwal says it's going to be very costly in terms of computation.
Yes, sir, it would be. But I think most of the state-of-the-art models today do require a lot of computation.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I just, I think about like, I just things to think about when you're mentioning these things. They're not as easy as maybe they seem. Well, I don't know if they seem easy, but there's a lot of like trial and error behind all this. I know with Vinay, for example, we had some trial and error last summer with, getting things to run, in terms of just computational resources that he had at his disposal. He talked about going to like a supercomputer and doing it at a high performance computing resource. So, there are these considerations you have to make when considering these architectures. But I like the idea of having like spatial and temporal streams that can be done. So you're doing like you're doing a temporal prediction, then you're doing spatial segmentation, and you're kind of combining those two.
Yes, so the main task of the temporal branch in this case is maintaining a coherence. So it shouldn't be that first of all you are segmenting one cell and in the very next frame you segment some other in some other place. So it is going to be the same cell. That's what temporal branch over here takes care of.
Yeah. Is there anyone else? Dick, do you have any questions or comments?
Should I run through the slides once again if anyone wants to have a look?
Sure, just go through slowly. People can look at them. I don't know if
So,
Dick is...
basically of what exactly could be done using this spatial temporal feature mapping. Yash explained 3D convolution, the 3D convolutional neural networks in this slides, what they do. This is optical flow and which capture motions at pixel level, and so these are different representations and types of optical flows. This is about this was a FlowNet paper and which computed optical flows using neural networks, and the second paper had been quite good and in achieving the required task as it is comparable to mathematical algorithms, so it kind of gives very good results. In computation, the computing optical flow, not in like segmenting. So, and this is a two-stream convolution neural networks where the temporal stream uses optical flows to get temporal coherence. And
So STCNN is a very similar example as the previous neural network for segmentation, except it does away with optical flow for the purpose of segmentation. So it helps computation power, and it is an end-to-end trainable model. That those are the two advantages of it over the previous network.
Dick, did you have something to say? I see you're back on line.
I had my mic off.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say this. I can recall this problem going back at least to the 1970s, and it's nice to see some new approaches to it. So it's an old problem which I guess is very important. It's certainly important to talk to themselves. So we shall see if it works.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh,
Here I went through the four-phase training and how the model actually worked. I explained UNet, which had been modified and used in the previous paper as well in the temporal branch.
so I had a question about like the second slide. If you go up, or it was like where you're talking about going from 2D to 3D. That's up
over
above.
here?
Maybe the third slide. No, up, way up. The second slide, I think. Yeah. So you show 2D convolution on multiple frames, and then 3D convolution. So the 2D convolution is just like on a flat surface. 2D convolution on multiple frames is like sort of the temporal part with just a two-dimensional frame.
Sir, it is, but it can be used for temporal, but originally it was planned to be used for all the three frames together of RGB image.
Okay.
You can apply 2D convolution in it.
so you stack various images together and pass them through 3D CNN, so they learn temporal coherence also. So, for example, there is a ball moving from left to right in an image, and suddenly it changes shape in between a frame. So, 2D convolution will have to learn, will find it difficult to learn these kinds of dependency, that there was a ball moving from left to right and suddenly it changes shape. But you can think that there are two 3D kernels that will look for a shape change and that will look for a ball. So in the later layers, this type of complex dependencies can be learned very easily.
So yeah, about your question, yes, it can be used to learn temporal features as well. But the thing is, it depends on what the third dimension is going to be of the input. Is it going to be the channel number R, G, or B, or is it going to be the frame number with respect to a time? So originally, the techniques were applied to channel number to the different channels, but this paper, which Yash explained, uses 3D convolutional neural networks on for when the fourth dimension is time over here, the time frame number.
Okay. Well, that looks good. Well, thank you for presenting. And if you have any questions, you can take them offline. You can put them on the OpenWorm Slack. If Devansh and Yash could send me the slides and a link to that video, I can send it out to the rest of the group. Otherwise, next week Ujwal is going to present on DNA barcoding. And then if anyone has any other announcements or things they want to bring up, you're welcome to do so. Again, we have slots to fill for the rest of the spring. So if you want to do something longer, like a paper review or something, you're welcome to schedule it. We can talk about that offline. So thanks for attending. Everyone have a good week. And talk to you next week or offline.